Yeah. And a lot of these ideas were in my mind too. And included in that was this idea of this patriarchal way of being, right? Very masculine. And independent, right? It's like almost behind the scenes, everybody knows that it's the head that they're really keeping things, going straight. But it was very patriarchal. And I remember being angry at different parts of my life as I was dismantling this idea of what it means to be Latina. And I was sharing with Jorge that I feel like I wouldn't have made the decisions that I made throughout my life when I was a younger person and a different person, if I didn't believe in those values and those ideas. And what I mean by that is, for example, and this might be a little deep, but I'm okay with sharing it, is like I was in an abusive marriage for a long time. And I let myself put up with it because I thought I had to. Because I thought you couldn't get a divorce. That was not heard of in Latino families. That's not normal, it's not accepted, right? When I went through that divorce, man, even the church I went to excluded me, right? I wasn't allowed to participate in events anymore. Things like that. My child, my oldest, is transgender male. He attempted his life. I almost lost him because he felt so scared to come out to the rest of our family, right? So it's those ideas that just get me like really thinking and just in conflict. And I'm not bashing. Please don't think that I'm not at all bashing. It's just really challenging and asking these questions and being able to dig deeper. So again, in preparation, as we're like, gosh, okay, what does this mean? Well, let's start with the definition, right? Let's just kind of define Latinidad. So we looked it up, and first, Wikipedia. Yeah, can somebody nice and loud read this out for us? Somebody with a loud voice, go for it.
Latinidad is a Spanish language term that refers to the various attributes shared by Latin American people and their descendants without reducing those similarities to any single essential trait.
Thank you. Can I get one more person to read this next term from Google AI? Go for it.
Latinidad is a Spanish term that refers to the various characteristics of Latin American people and their social construct that contributes a variety of experiences in immigration, colonialism, race, and class.
Beautiful. And so, on paper, this sounds great, and this sounds all-encompassing, and it sounds inclusive. But for whatever reason, I was still struggling with it. And to know that if I was alone or not, I started reaching out to folks over the last couple of weeks that are not fully, like Mexican, not fully Latino or whatever, right? They have other backgrounds in them, just to kind of get their perspective and to see, was I alone in this feeling of not feeling included in this, right? And what I found was when I talked to folks who are like half Japanese and half Mexican. I talked to a friend who's from Guatemala, but grew up in Los Angeles. I talked to one of my best friends who's Yaqui, Mexican and queer. I talked to Black folks. And what I kept learning from every single person was that this did not feel inclusive, even though on paper it says that. But in practice, it doesn't feel inclusive. My Black friends felt erased still, even though they had Latin blood in them, right? My queer folks didn't feel included. My friend who's Japanese was like, when I'm with my Japanese family, I don't feel fully Japanese, and when I'm with a Mexican family, I don't feel fully Mexican. There's this erasure, right? So it finally dawned on me barely. I wish I would have done it sooner, but it dawned on me a couple days ago, like, you know what? I need to reach out to my professor from Cal State Los Angeles. So I went to Cal State LA. And one of my professors there, Carlos Tejeda, wonderful human being, and he's really the one that kind of woke me up. He's the one that was like really teaching about what it means to decolonize. And so I hit him up and I was like, listen, we're asked to do this keynote and I'm struggling because I'm struggling with this idea of Latinidad. And mainly because I have conflict with a lot of the values, and not just that, but like it represents the colonizer in my mind. And the colonizer has separated me from my indigenous roots, and I don't know my language, and I don't know my cultural practices as well as I could have had this colonization not taken place, and so it's a struggle. So if I'm rejecting the name, am I rejecting my blood? Because on my mom's side, what we figured out is I'm a Portuguese. So how do I wrestle with that? How do I name that? How do I deal with that, right? Without feeling hypocritical and without contradicting myself. And how do I get up here in front of you and share this? He's like, Walter Mignolo. And I'm like, who, what, right? He wrote this book called The Idea of Latin America. You're not going to have enough time to read it because you have a couple days that you're going to be out there, but pick it up. But I found it online. Actually, somebody put a PDF version online, so I read as much as I could. And that's kind of where I'm at today, that I thought, you know what I kind of picked up so far, I want to be able to share with y'all. And I'm still clearly, as you know, I'm being transparent in this journey also with identity. And so that's what I want to share with you today. So, one of the things I was reminded of and was able to learn a little bit deeper. Does anybody know where the name America came from? Say it again? And so, yeah, Amerigo Vespucci, okay? What had happened was that Amerigo Vespucci, he was an Italian explorer. He came about 10 years after Columbus, right? He was influenced by Columbus. He was a banker. He decided to leave all that and do some exploring. And he found himself in Brazil. And at some point, he's looking at the stars in Brazil, and he realized, hey, these aren't the same stars that I see back home by the Mediterranean. And what he realized is that, oh, we're not like in another part of the land, of the continent. We're in a whole new continent, a whole new world, right? So he was credited with, quote, discovering the fourth continent. Because at that time, they only knew about Asia and Africa, and now, not calling it Amerigo, they called it America because there was like, again, the Africa, Asia. So they kind of wanted to keep that pattern going. So hence it was called America, North America, Central America, South America. And what I also learned through this book was that where the term Latinidad actually came from. So Latinidad was given as a term to describe the people of these lands. But first they had to call it something else. They called it Latin America because it was a way to other people. Because so when they, quote, discovered these lands and started bringing Europeans over to colonize the land and to take its resources, they had to do something about the people there. So either they were displaced, they were brought into servitude, and also what was happening was Europeans were now mixing, right, with the black folks there and the native folks there. And so they were given all these names, like Juan Carlos had shown a whole list of different identities that we're starting to give to folks. But it was a way to describe, again, it was an othering. To kind of define that these are the lands that we've taken over, that we've conquered, and that now there's this new group of people that aren't quite fully European and are then subhuman or less than, right? And so I showed this picture here. Anybody know what this is? I think I heard it. Someone say that? Maybe not. I'm having a hard time hearing this. So if somebody mentioned it, but this is what we call Turtle Island. And to me, this is just, again, another way to push back. So from indigenous beliefs, especially more in what's now the United States and Mexico, is that we call this place Turtle Island. And again, it was like the name that was already there, but you had these invaders who come in and just decide, oh, we're just naming it what we mean, and that's what the name is today, right? What I want to share about Turtle Island is that there's many different variations of this story and why it's called Turtle Island, and I'll give the quickest one that I can remember. And so the story goes that when Creator created what was created on Earth, it was the sea and the air. And you had sea animals and you had land animals. And at some point, Creator said, you know what, I want there to be land. I want there to be this in-between space where everybody can kind of be together and come together. And so there was all the different animals were trying to take turns into like, okay, who should be the one that goes down to the bottom of the ocean to bring up the dirt from the bottom of the ocean? And then Turtle said, you can put it on my back. Put that on my back and it'll grow and that'll become earth and that'll become land. And so the story goes is that it was decided that the muskrat, who doesn't know how to swim well, the muskrat said, I am going to go down to the bottom and grab what I can, knowing that he would have to sacrifice himself. And he did. He went down to the bottom, he grabbed as much as he could, and he passed away in the process. So his body floated to the top, and what they found in him was dirt and soil. And Turtle said, put it on my back. And Mother Earth, like I said, went ahead and just let it grow, and let it grow, and let it grow. And eventually, people were then on the earth and living together with So just wanted to share that as a pushback. So as I was talking about this idea of Latiné, it was a way to name who was conquered and what lands were conquered. So I thought it'd be nice to show this visual of these European countries and how much they colonized and where. And I'll give it a minute for y'all to kind of just look at the key and look at the different spaces where, and again, as an Indigenous person, I look at it from that perspective of like, wow, how many cultures were erased, how many languages were erased. So one of the ideas in the few pages that I was able to kind of read out of this book that my professor turned me on to was this idea of discovery versus invention. Right? So the way that the Europeans started to write history, so mind you, when the Europeans came here, they started writing the history of the indigenous people there. They started writing, they didn't write the history of black individuals, though, that they were considered even below native people. They were just not included. And so they wrote it from this angle of discovery. But really, what Mundo O'Gorman says is that the invention of America implies the appropriation and integration of the continent into Euro-Christian identity. So they had to invent it. They had to invent this term, Latinidad. And the other big idea that I'm wrestling with and just really like chewing on, but it gives me a framework and it gives me language to process everything that I'm sharing with you that I'm still really processing through. It's this idea of modernity and coloniality. So modernity is really basically what it's saying is that as the Europeans came and conquered these lands, they knew, oh, we have to modernize it. Oh, these people are savages. Oh, they're just not as advanced as we are. And so we need to model all of their lands and all of their structures in the European way. Right? And that's the goal. What bothers me is that, again, when you really go down into indigenous roots and the way folks were living, it wasn't that we weren't advanced. We're very advanced. You know, if you really look deeper, we have the greatest astrologers, the greatest mathematicians, but we're not given that credit, right? It was the pyramids we built, it was the aliens that did it, right? It wasn't, we're not given that credit. And great, what you would call doctors, right, healers, these people, our ancestors were and are brilliant. And that was being erased. Then there's idea later that came of coloniality, where in order for modernity to work, coloniality had to happen. So it's the dark side of modernity, told from the perspective of, quote, the wretched. That term comes from a man named from Fanning, who labeled Native people and Black folks as the wretched of the earth, right? So for us wretched of the earth, our perspective is, you didn't discover us, you colonized us. So again, it relies on this colonial matrix of power. And the two things that I want to mention, there's a lot to mention, but I think the two that are really important, that what happens is that one of the first things that they do is they rename us, they rename our land. So again, there were names already for the lands here. For example, the Aztec folks in the Valley of Mexico, that was called Anahuac, right? So there were names already here, and yet here they come and like, oh no, you're American now, and you're Latin American, right? And they renamed the people. Like my tribe is Puebla. When I say that a lot to folks from Mexico, they're like, okay, what? But when I say Tabasco or Tabascan, oh, okay, now I know what you're talking about, Michoacan, right? Okay, but that wasn't our name. That was given to us by the Spaniards, right? And there's a lot of that, like Navajo. A lot of people have heard the Navajo. That's not their name, it's Diné, right? So most tribes that I know have an original name. So this idea that it was done through control, it was done through domination and exploitation. That's the other thing. You gotta remember, we have rich, beautiful resources on our land, and that's what they wanted, right? That's what they wanted, to keep their economy going, to keep the capitalistic way of life going. But they did it through the name of salvation, of progress, of modernizing. visuals. There's an individual named, I'm blanking on his name right now, oh my gosh. I wish I could, I'm blanking on his name. But he creates these beautiful maps where it takes a map as we would know it, where we would see it as with state names and country names. These are the original, so instead he does maps by tribes, right? So, like the Yaqui is really Yoemit, so he has both names where he can, right? Where it's the original name and then the name that folks know it more as today. So you see here, Boreveja, where we truck on in. Here is the map of what's known as Central America. So you can see the tribes here. How many? That's just boggles my mind. There's so many. And then I will show, I wish I could zoom in, but it's so big. And this is what's known as South America, right? So again, just to give you that visual of how many people, how many tribes, how many nations, how many languages, how many ceremonies, how many cultures. Speaking of ceremony, I just want to mention that. Did you know that it wasn't until 1978 that Native people could practice ceremonies publicly within the United States? It was illegal for us to do that until 46 years ago. So, as we kind of start to wrap up, I wanted to share this last piece, and so what I'm getting into in this book, at least I'm not done with it yet, but what I'm getting into is that the next idea that the author's going to talk about in this book is this idea of like, okay, so maybe physically we're not being quote unquote like colonized in terms of where they're taking over our land and bringing things, and don't get me wrong, it's still happening in little places. There's reservations across the states where they're still coming in on the land for resources, for oil and minerals and things like that. It's still happening all over the world when we think of Gaza and the West Bank and Libya, and it's still happening, okay? And so it's important that we know this and recognize it as it happens in other places in the world, happening in the Congo. It's still happening. But what I want to share is that what the author is really trying to get us to think about is, so physically with land it may not be happening, but we're still in a colonized, we're in many colonized systems. When we think about the economy that we're in now, when we think about the institutions that we attend, those are all not original ideas of our people, those are European systems. So if you hear yourself saying, the system is broken, right? The schools are broken, the judicial system is broken, the police system is broken. They're not broken. They're designed to work the way that they're working. They just weren't designed for us, right? And so sometimes people say, well, I'm just going to kind of go activate as a teacher. I'm going to go in the school system. I'm going to change it from the inside out. It doesn't work. It has to be completely just done. That's my opinion. I'm not trying to like change minds, but that's my opinion. And my lived experience is that we got to start over. We got to start completely over for it to really work. So the challenge then that I know that this book is going to take moving forward is like, how do we do that? How do we continue to decolonize out of such a system that has us locked in? We're very locked into capitalism. It's just, and I can speak hours more on that, but I won't. And so I'm going to pass it back to Jorge because one of the other big messages that we want to talk about and that folks have already been talking about is this idea of resistance, right? How do we challenge? How do we push back? And how do we have resistance against these systems? And one of the ways we do it is through this run summit.
Yeah, no, thank you, Maria. I think in the weeks leading up to this event, we wanted to find a way to appropriately implement this group that both Maria and I participate in, and I've had the privilege to be a member of this group for now close to, I think I'm closing on a decade now, actually. And I think it's important to bring this group up because of some of the reasons I'm about to explain right now, but just a little bit of what this group is. And it's a group that basically follows the leadership and the traditions of early Native Americans who back in the day would deliver messages from reservation to reservations on foot. And this message that they were trying to pass on from reservation to reservation was that all life is sacred. And this motto, you can say, continues to be our primary principle in our group. And we try to deliver this message through many different training events that we do every month where we run and for example, in San Jose, or we'll go up to Ukiah, and we go to many different places to deliver this message. And in this group, we believe that running is used as a form of prayer. So we run with intention, we run with spirit, and a lot of the things that we run for people who are sick, for our elders, for our ancestors, for people who are going through addictions. And most importantly, we run for Mother Earth, we run for the water, we run for the air, we run for the four directions, we run for everything that Mother Earth provides for us. And it's something that, even though this group is multicultural, people from different ethnic backgrounds, we still can come together at the end of the day for this one message and this one idea, which is such a beautiful thing. And the way that this run came about, and Maria had already mentioned it actually previously, was that a man named Dennis Banks, who was also the co-founder of the American Indian Movement, wanted to commemorate there was an event called the Longest Walk where over 500 different tribes walked across the country all the way to DC, and to lobby for Native American rights, which, then 1978 happened with the Freedom of Religion Act, which is so important because before that, if we wanted to do a ceremony right now with like sage, or we wanted to do like a four directions prayer, like you and I wouldn't do that. That was completely illegal. And it wasn't until 1978 that Native American people were able to now freely and independently do and practice their ceremonies, practice Sundance, practice songs, and practice their language, which is so, so important. And I think the biggest idea that I want to share is that the reason why we wanted to bring up this group is because this is, and I think back to yesterday's, to Dr. Aviola, when she said that the way we resist is by continuing to do what we do, and we're actively resisting by the things we participate in. And doing things and participating in a group like this is we're actively resisting against colonial ideologies and pushing back against the oppression that's existed for hundreds of years. And the other message that I want to deliver to you guys is that this group has allowed both, and Maria can also expand on this further, that this group is a safe place for me, just as much as for me and for other people, to continue questioning a lot of these things and building our identity. And it's a safe place where we can do that without feeling judged or without feeling some sort of way about, these kind of difficult conversations that we can have. So I don't know if Maria wants to chip in on that, but the run has definitely been a safe place for me to continue to explore my Latino identity and have these difficult conversations like we're having today. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Just that, so how did you come to the run, I guess, all that?
I basically came to the run through, you guys will actually hear some of his music later. His name is Lakshman. He's a teacher at the school that I'm a board of directors for, and that was the middle school that I attended. And Lakshman would hold basically like a miniature version of this group, like a running group. And he would take us to field trips for the training events. And I went to one when I was, I think, about 11 years old, and I've been going ever since. So, 9 years later, I'm still going strong.
So I came to the run, and why the run is very important to me is that it turned out that the very first run in 1978 or 77, I think was the first run, they ran out of La Paz, right? And I was born in 78 in La Paz, but I wasn't born quite yet, but I remember, so every year they would come to La Paz, and they would come set up their tents, and they would wake up really, really early, and they'd leave really early, so we knew if we missed them, we missed them. But there was a tradition there, and the tradition was that Cesar Chavez would make them pancakes before that they would head off on their run. And so growing up, I knew the run would come, and it wasn't until 5 years ago that I joined the group at one of their runs, just to come and say hi, just to kind of give my respect because of the long history between United Farm Workers and this run. And actually, Dennis Banks, now that I'm thinking about it, who co-founded, he was actually on the run at some point in the 70s from the FBI. And one of his hideouts was at La Paz for a little bit, right? So there's just this deep connection there. And my dad is the liaison between the UFW and the 500 mile runs, and he was always at these events. So I thought I would go check in with my dad, say hi to my dad, who's in the area, and say hi. And then it was, Nadia, why don't you come run with us today? Okay, why not? And it ended up being this warrior coming in, and but what I found in the run like Jorge was saying, is that it's just such a safe space for me, especially as somebody who's constantly evolving and constantly checking in on what is my identity, who am I, who do I want to be, right? Those kinds of questions that you all were discussing. And this run is a safe space for me to do that. And so I really, really appreciate it. And, you know, yeah. Okay. So basically, what we have on here just to help us kind of bring it all together, these are the three things that we hope that make sense out of our conversation with y'all this morning. And so the first is division versus unity.
Yeah, so I think when I think about division and unity and the way it relates to the presentation we gave today, I think the unity part of it comes alive when I talk about the group and how people from all walks of life come together and be all unified as one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think for us, again, as we're digging into what it means, what does Latinidad mean, it does feel divisive because it's not all inclusive. And with that said, you know, again, when we're repping countries and we're repping, like, those are man-made, these boundaries are man-made, they're meant or it can divide us. Yes, there's pride in it, and that's great to feel connected to the land, but let's not let that divide who we are as people, right? What should unify us is the fact that we're human, the fact that we're living, right? What I love about Indigenous values is that what we wake up knowing is that all of you, even though I don't know you, and I may not talk to you face to face, but I love you because I am you, right? You are me. Have you heard that term, in la catch? Right? You are my other me, you are my other half, right? It's like we're looking in this mirror at each other. So I should treat you with respect and with love because we are related, right? And we're not just related to each other as two-leggeds, we're related to the four-leggeds and the ones that swim and the ones with wings, right? And the ones that crawl. We're all related and we need to treat everything with love. That all life is sacred, right? And one of the things I want to share with unity is my experience growing up in the United Farm Worker movement really taught me unity. Because I was sharing with Carlos the other night, I said, you know, the UFW tends to have this flavor of Chicano, right? It's like a thing that represents the Chicano movement. But in reality, it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the Filipinos. And that gets erased. The UFW, in fact, wasn't the UFW until it was a merge. It was a merge between AWOC, the Agricultural Workers of California, which was a Filipino-led union, and then you had the National Farm Worker Association that was started by Soza and Dolores Huerta. And it wasn't until about 1964-65 the Filipinos came to Dolores and Soza and said, we need your help. We're in this strike, we're in this boycott, we're getting beat. Like, we need your support. They could have been like, look, we're brand new, we're babies at this, we have $100 in the bank, we're not ready to do this, but they knew that they had to, right? So they merged and became the UFW. And growing up in La Paz, I saw white folks, Protestant, Jewish, different ages, different ethnicity, all of that, right? So I just want to share that. Colonization and risk.
Yeah, and so I think I'll just finish both of these off just because I think we're running out of time. Maya mentioned it earlier, it's like colonization continues to exist today and it continues to be well alive in our everyday lives, and basically we want to challenge you guys to actively resist against those colonial ideologies and systems. And by doing things like how me and Maria do with the group, and even just learning about the history of your family is an excellent way of fighting against colonization, getting to know your roots and your ancestors. And unless you want to add anything else to that, and for me, I think the most important message for today is that you shouldn't feel pressured to get to know who you are today or later today or after this event or even tomorrow, next week, next month. No, like I think this idea of your identity is a lifelong journey that continues to reshape itself very, very often. So I think understanding that this is a lifelong journey of getting to know yourself and not feeling like there's like this end goal or like self-actualization that doesn't necessarily exist. So yeah, I think that's it. That's it from us.
So now we're going to begin our Q&A session. So I'll start us off. I have a question for both of you. So you're both involved in the education of like young people, like with E3, and Jorge, you with being the board of, on the board of directors of a middle school. How would you say that's the best way to approach having these conversations with younger people, and especially about unity, that whole idea? Because I know that when you're younger, like the ideas that you're exposed to, they stick with you. So how do you like best approach that?
Ooh, yeah, that's a tough one because what I don't want to do is disregard who the person is, right? But knowing, helping them understand that there's influences all around and really what's meaningful to that person. And so one of the things I like to think about is that the Blackfoot Nation has this idea that you're born already self-actualized. There's this idea, and educators would know this with Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? Where all of your physical needs need to be met first, all these different needs need to be met first before you actually self-actualize. And where the Blackfoot Nation says, no, you're already born with everything that you have and everything you have to offer. So how do we make the best out of that? And how does that contribute back into society, if that makes sense?
I'm trying to think, because I'm also pretty young, bro. I'm just 19. I'm just as close as to you guys, but man. No, it's how would I shape that? No, I might get a pass on that one, bro, because, yeah. But that's a good question. That's a good question.
All right, if anyone else wants to come up, you can come up now and give some questions.
Hi, thank you for your speech. What do you think would be like the major change in the U.S. if we discontinued like our colonized practices and went back to our indigenous ways? Why do you think that would be better?
I think that it's our duty to take care of Earth. I think I have to start there, right? To take care of Earth, because the way that it is now, it's all exploitation. We exploit the Earth, and we see it now. There's climate change, right? There's just disaster after disaster, but it's because we're not taking care of each other. We're not taking care of the Earth, and so the challenge is that it's so deeply rooted. Like capitalism is what we know, right? And it's taught us, what capitalism teaches is to be an individual, to keep us in competition, right? To keep us just looking out for yourself. And that's not how we're designed. Our brains, our spirit are designed to be community. And so I think it's like we have to just do it one thing at a time. Yeah, we protest, and yeah, we lobby, but it's so strong. Like I know they were saying yesterday, money is power. And it is, it's true. You have lobbyists with powerful money that are pushing, because it comes down to legislation, right? We've got to pass law. But it's hard when those legislators get blocked once they come in. I mean, I don't want to get too political here, but as an example, a lot of us looked to AOC or Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, like, oh, that's going to be our champion. But when she got in there, things changed and she got by. That's just an example, right? So I think it comes down to the individual. So for example, what we're doing on the lab that I'm at right now, we founded this project called the Sacred Sequence Project, where that's just what we're doing. We're bringing people on the land who need healing, and we're just teaching folks how to work with the land and live with the land and respect each other and just so it's just practicing it in your daily life, and then hopefully that spreads.
Thank you.
This is for Jorge. How has going to Bellarmine, throughout your 4 years, how have you grown through your Latino identity?
I think when I reflect on my experience when I was here at Bellarmine, even when I was sitting down thinking about it, I was like, because obviously it's like both Maria and I were raised Catholic, and we also got to be involved in this group, and we're also exposed to Native American spirituality. So there's this I almost feel like a hypocrite at times, like I go to church, but then I go do this, right? But then I try to. When I think about my experiences at Bellarmine, I think about service, I think about being man-born with others, and that's been honestly one of my guiding compass throughout my life and navigating my Latino identity, which is what can I do for my people, for my community, and that's why I got involved in things like the group. That's why I got involved with the board of directors at the middle school. Even though I had the opportunity to work as a staff member at the middle school, I thought that the best way to make an impact on the school, on the students, and in the broader community was through a position like that. So I think Bellarmine was honestly set the foundation for a lot of things and gave me the tools to be able to navigate, and explain my Latino identity. And kind of like I said, that's a lifelong journey. It's not something I'm going to figure out, next year or in 10 years. It's going to be something that continues changing. But yeah, excellent question. Appreciate it.
What would you both say has been like your biggest challenge during the 500, and how did you guys both overcome it?
Yeah, so I think I just shared a little bit about it. I think one of the biggest challenges is more of an internal one that I've had with myself, with balancing like my Catholic values that I've learned back home, and then also navigating, the reality of it is like what the church has done to Native American people in this time. So I think it's not like I have to choose one or the other, but it's something that, gives me a lot of conflict inside. So I think outside of the running and putting in the miles every single day, I think the most difficult part for me is that I think navigating through those two complexities and finding some sort of middle ground with that,
I think for me it's two. There's a physical challenge and a spiritual challenge. And so the physical piece, honestly, I hate running. I don't like running, right? But I found that, and Soza taught me this too, is that it's when you sacrifice yourself that you feel of service to others, right? So sacrificing my body, which I hate it, right? But I have found that praying for what I pray for, I've seen things come to fruition in such beautiful ways. So that's kind of what keeps me going. And I think spiritually the challenging part is praying for people that I may be in conflict with. So that's kind of how I kind of do it. Like I'm a Mexican person, I don't like how they're treating me or treating me, so I'm gonna pray for them, right? But so getting myself to like actually do that, because I could just be like, whatever, but you know what I mean? But like being able to put that person in my prayer, it is a challenge, yeah.
I actually really wanted to very quickly highlight an example of how you can make change. Something that actually Jorge led when he was a student here. You alluded to that briefly, but I wanted to say that Jorge, along with other students, and I want you to comment on that, there was a policy at our school that said that we were an all-boys school, they have to be cleanly shaved, right, every day. And it's a policy that has been around had been around in our community probably since 1851. That if you are a student here, you have to shave, right? And then one day, Jorge came up to me and another student said, we don't like this policy, can we do something about it? And I want you to talk about that journey because I don't want to spoil it, but we got rid of that rule that had been in our community for all this time. And it was led by students. And they had a reason that I want you to highlight, which is connected to what you were talking. So talk briefly about that.
Yeah, so the only reason why I was kind of hesitant in bringing it up is because it's so there's so much to that story that I don't want to it wouldn't do it justice just kind of briefly throwing it out there. And I appreciate you mentioning it because I think outside of my athletic accomplishments and in the classroom, that I think is the best thing I did here at Latiné. I mean, and just to give a little brief history about that, Mr. Jimenez just brought it up. There's a policy here at Bellarmine where you had to be cleanly shaven, and it had existed since the beginning of the school. It was just one of those rules that had existed for so long that nobody ever questioned it. And I think the facial hair policy started becoming an issue once the school started becoming more diverse. And you had a diverse student body, and you started having more Latinos coming to the school and other ethnicities coming in. And this really started with some of us chilling in the cafeteria and talking about growing mustaches and stuff and kind of getting harassed on a regular basis by the deans and telling us to shave. And this was after we came back from COVID, so we grow it out and then put the mask over and then we would be avoiding all the staff and stuff so they didn't catch us. And I think it got to a point where some of the friends, it started out as a group thing with our friends, and we had brought it up, it's we should do something about this, this is something that needs to change. And I think it's something that not only us as Latinos would benefit from, but also many others, like other ethnic groups in the campus. And we brought it up to Mr. Jimenez, and we're like, yeah, like, we gotta do like this whole, presentation, and we gotta go get support from the other clubs around the school. And we remember we went to the, was it Justice? Where like all the clubs get together?
Yeah, Unity Council.
Unity Council. We went to Unity Council and presented this, this proposal, this idea that we had, in hopes that other affinity groups would support us, and we had people like the Sikh Student Union, the LGBTQ community of the school supported us. Basically, everybody supported us, which was amazing. And yeah, so when it ended up just being 3 of us that were working on this project, and then the day came, and then they kind of like bailed out on me and left me by myself to go do this presentation in front of all these like high-profile members of the school. And I was luckily Mr. Jimenez was there, to help me out and apoyarme in that process. And yeah, I think it was one of those things that the school was already kind of thinking about changing, but it just needed someone to push it. Someone to do something about it and throw it out there. And yeah, I don't know what else you want me to add for that. I think, yeah, and now I guess you guys are allowed to go facial, which I'm really jealous about, seeing all these guys with like beards and mustaches, but I'm happy that I was able to do some change. And like you said, Mr. Jimenez, this is a perfect example of what you guys as students can do in your own communities, and that yes, you can make a difference.
Question for Maria. What advice would you give to future indigenous communities?
Future indigenous communities. So do you mean like young folks who are maybe discovering their indigenous?
Yeah.
My advice would be to do some digging. Go home, talk to your parents, your grandparents, and kind of ask, where did we come from? Where did we migrate from, maybe, and dig deeper. And that's kind of what I had to do, because it's educated and not passed down to us. I had to dig deep in where did we migrate from, and that's when I figured out the location in Michoacan, and that we were Purépecha, and then just really digging deeper into like what kind of ceremonies do we have, what is our language, and just reconnecting in those ways. And what's beautiful about doing those things and just even speaking it into the universe is all of a sudden, in my experience, there's pathways open up, and all of a sudden people are going to come into your life that are also indigenous and maybe also be from the same nation or tribe or people that you're from. And we'll start instilling those things, and I don't know, it's going to just you find it around you, and it'll just naturally start to come. Yeah, does that make sense? You think you see it?
Yeah, one more.
Okay.
I have a question. What advice would you give to students who may be struggling with like their Hispanic identity, whether it be like getting recognition or overall just feeling involved in a lot of these kind of events?
I think when we were kind of talking about it, and I hope this answers your question, but we kind of started thinking like maybe it's less about identity and it's more about how you live your life on the day-to-day, right? And so like when earlier we were introducing ourselves, I was more of the vein of like, I'm a mom and I'm an educator and I'm an organizer. Like that's how I service my community. That's how I serve young people around me. And in that I find joy, in that I find, because identity just, it gets so complicated, and it gets us stuck. And sometimes it puts us in boxes that we don't need to be in. Does that make sense? And remember how I showed those social constructs. Like identity is that, it's society making us identify as a gender or as a class or as education levels. Like, can I just be a human? Can I just be a spirit? That's why I kind of look at myself as I'm a spirit in a human body, right? And so I think that would be my advice, to like maybe not let that be so heavy, and more so like, how do you feel, and how do you show up in the world, and how do you show up in your community, And again, just always keeping in mind it's always evolving, and you may change the way you identify throughout your life, and that's okay. Being okay with that, yeah.
Thank you so much. Please join me in giving a big round of applause for Maria. And now I'm going to invite up Matthew, who's going to lead the reflection.
I just want to say thank you again to Maria and Jorge for being here today. I know I learned a lot and have a lot of questions coming up for me. In a moment, we will have time to do a silent reflection. But before we do, can we get 2 to 3 people to share a takeaway from our keynote speakers? But before, I'll start first. A takeaway from me is how identity is not just as simple as it may seem, but a journey of finding a place of belonging and community. So now I'd like to open it up to everyone, a takeaway from our keynote speakers. Don't be shy.
Shout it out.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. We will now have time for a silent reflection. I know journaling might not be everyone's thing, but I encourage you to write down a few notes reflecting on our country. To help with your reflection, please write the following questions in your journal. What does staying connected with my ancestors look like for me? How has my education supported my identity formation?